Hey, it's Corinne. I'm here with Rhandu Adams, the Resolutionary. Rhandu, introduce yourself to the people.
Yes, my name is Rhandu Adams, Rhandu the Resolutionary. That is resolution as a conflict resolution. A lot of people get mixed up with revolutionary, but it's all about resolving conflict. And I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, Bed-Stuy, by way of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been there for the last 30 years in Charlotte.
He's from Charlotte.
Nah. Yeah.
Us, we as Black people have suffered great adversity in America. 2025 has a whole different experience for us than it ever has before, and so we have the opportunity to kind of, interview and to speak about what these changes and what the past and how it all comes together. But for you, the past, like you said, starts in Brooklyn. How does your, early childhood, teenage experiences, being from Brooklyn, how does that impact you being a resolutionary? What did that look like for you?
Wow, so to get a short version of why I became a resolutionary was, number one, I have a background, should I say, I stand on the shoulders of revolutionaries. When I say I stand on the shoulders of revolutionaries, my uncle, who his name is Timothy Red Adams, was one of the founders. Now, you won't see this documented per se, but he was one of the founders of the Black Liberation Army. And as people know about the Black Panther movement, but people don't talk about the Black Liberation Army. So you figure the Black Panther movement, or should I say the Black Panthers, are more politically driven in the area of their message in protecting and speaking on behalf of Black people. But the BLA was more like the army of the Black Panthers. So every movement needs an army. Was connected with Afeni Shakur, Tupac Shakur's mother, and Joanne Chesimard, formerly known as Joanne Chesimard, who is now considered a Sada Shakur. So I grew up with all the uncles who were talking about the Black Power movement, revolutionary movement, the BLA movement, and I learned it as a young man. When we're looking at resolution, coming up in the streets of Brooklyn, when I was, involved in certain activities in the streets, I was more of a diplomat in Brooklyn years. I brought people together for a common cause, whether, people who were having beefs with each other. I knew both sides. I knew this person over here had a situation with somebody over here. Because I was cool with both sides, someone would come to me and say, Rhandu, can you go talk to such and such, man, we need to try to resolve this issue. So I was a peacemaker.
So do you think that, especially during the 80s, the 90s, Brooklyn, New York was very intense. The crack era was happening. And so what I hear you saying is that you were kind of a mediator for a lot of street, and conflicts and things that were going on. So how do you translate those experiences from, what happened to us as Black people, right? And where we're at right now and where you are right now professionally? How do you feel like the climate of Brooklyn, New York at that time has transferred into what you stand for now?
Okay, so if you're looking at conflict, right, I always believe, or I had to learn that the conflict starts with yourself, right? The conflict, so you're looking at coming up in the 80s, not only in Brooklyn, but New York City as a whole, all five boroughs. We all were dealing with conflicting situations, but the greatest conflict we were dealing with was with ourselves.
Wow.
So, having conflicting trauma or conflicting views about ourselves, we were in conflict with each other. So unless we know that when you're looking at conflict resolution or resolving a conflict, it takes two people to resolve a conflict. Now you can't resolve a solution, or should I say there's no solutions to conflict between human behavior, because that's when you deal with solution, I always deal with numbers. But when you're looking at it takes two people, one person and the other person just come and say, hey, let's talk about it. Because in any conflict, there's always going to be one person who's more aggressive than the other person. There's always going to be one person say, I'm not going to bow down, but doesn't mean that other person doesn't want to bow down as well.
Right.
So if you find out who those people are in every conflict, you bring them two together. So my thing was, coming where we are now, is that I said, well, we have to first resolve the conflict within ourselves, or within yourself, starting with you, starting with me. If I can resolve the conflict that I have with myself, it's easy for me to come to a person who maybe I disagree with, maybe we don't have the same things in common. I can say, okay, how can we come together to work together and resolve whatever issue, whatever disagreement that we have with each other?
So when we're thinking about Black history, right, and conflict within self, how does the history of Black people impact the internal conflict, in your opinion? Where it's a lot of conflict amongst us, right? So how does our history, in your opinion, create internal conflict?
Well, I can say my opinion, but I can also say historically there's a fact that all behavior is learned behavior. And you had to say that based through slavery, we were taught to be in conflict with each other. All right, it was learned behavior because we were looking at our former slave masters, who probably still exist today, even in today's time. They taught us to be in conflict with one another by dividing and conquering. So they made us to believe that we are different from one another based on our skin color, our where we came from, so forth and so on. All that is learned behavior. So that ties into now why we are in conflict today. And it's still happening even in the 21st century. We're still conflicting with one another, not realizing the source of that conflict doesn't come from us, it comes from them. And we know who they are. Right? So, as a resolutionary, I said, I'm gonna call myself Rhandu the Resolutionary because I'm trying to resolve conflict, number one, within different communities. I'm trying to work with young people to understand, to get them to understand at an early age, you have to first start with yourself. You have to first find the peace within yourself. And once you find the peace within yourself, you're able to spread that peace amongst other people who maybe have a struggle with conflict with themselves as well.
Right. So when we look at like where we're at right now, all over the internet, there's, they always are referring to the young Black men as the YNs, right? And because they're ruthless, they don't have a tolerance for white oppression, and it's almost as if the way you speak of, your uncle Timothy Adams and the Black Liberation Army. It's almost as if the youth that you work with and you aim to, support are that same energy, but without organization or structure. So how would you support our young people, our young Black people, especially Black men? Like, what do you feel like is your vision for how we would help take our young Black men now from YNs into a structured support for our community?
Okay, so when you're looking at, if you don't mind me being realistic, YNs, you call them, young niggas.
Young niggas.
Young niggas. Let's be real. We laughing, right? So let's talk about it. So YNs are considered young niggas. So let's take away the young niggas and convert them to young brothers. And we do that by teaching them. Back in the day when my uncles were coming up, number one, they were taught. They had a lot of wisdom around them, right? So therefore, they respected their elders. Right now, the YNs, the young niggas, they look at somebody like me, an older brother, as an old head.
You an unk.
Yeah, I'm an unk, or I'm an old head.
So
we have to debunk that. We have to debunk that notion because as much energy as they have, they're crying and they're reaching out for something. Now, a lot of our young YNs is misguided anger. It's misguided anger. And what we have to do as the old heads or the elders, we have to meet them where they are. Meet them where they are. Speak with them. Don't talk at them, but speak with them. Sit down and ask questions. What's going on? How can I help you? How can we talk about what's really going on? Because a lot of times the anger that they have towards the old heads is misguided. It may be because their mothers and their fathers have failed them. Their uncles and their aunts have failed them. And I'm talking about both young brothers and young sisters, right? So you have to reach them and meet them where they are and understand that their anger is misguided. And what's happening is because they don't know where to exert that energy, that negative energy, they're exerting that energy on themselves. And that's why you have so much violence out here, because they're misguiding their anger towards each other instead of to what's really going on internally.
The internal conflict.
Internal conflict. And we have to admit, as the old heads or the elders, we have our own conflict. We're not immune. We're still healing. Every day we're healing as Black people overall. But if you know that if you can admit that you're healing as an old head or an elder, you should know and understand your job is to help. You know, and you don't help yourself as healing, but also help these young brothers to heal and turn that YN, the young niggas, into young brothers. And that's what my uncle was. He became that, whatever anger he was going through at 22 years old, he converted that to a cause. He always told me, no matter what you do it for the cause and not because. And that's why he turned the cause, his because he was anger, into cause for black people. And that's why he did what he did with the black liberation law.
That's wonderful. So just to, we could talk forever, because I believe that the needs of our community, your desire to be a blessing to our community, needs to be discussed in length. Not just discussed, but also action. And so in light of it being Black History Month and us having a dream for our people, having endured generation after generation of slavery, a genocide in American land, I want to ask you, what is your vision and your hope that you would like to be remembered for when it's all said and done, and your life is no longer in the physical? When people speak of Black History Month and they think of Rhandu Adams, what do they remember you for?
I want to be remembered as an ageless man, an ageless black man who was able to build a bridge between the old and the young, and to keep that bridge together, where the young is crossing the bridge to reach the young, and the young is crossing the bridge to reach the elders. And I think that's what we have to do. There's a disconnect. There is a disconnect. There's a disconnect between the young brothers and sisters and the older brothers and sisters. A lot of times, as older brothers and sisters, we look at our young people like, what's going on with them? They're just out of control. But it was still a generational cycle that all of us have gone through. It's just that right now, technology supersedes what is really going on with our young people. Social media is one of the greatest self-destruction tools in our community that exists. So I want to be legacy behind is someone who built a bridge between the young and the old and kept that bridge constantly going across that bridge to meet each other where we are. You're gonna have young brothers who say, okay, I can cross this bridge and go to my older brother and sister to help me out. I want our older brother and sister to go down and say, let me go reach out to my young. And is it each one teach one? Because my thing is, I always tell young people, I need you. For me to exist, I need you.
Yeah.
So therefore, I want to learn from you. Teach me what is going on with you. And I can teach you what I've been through. And I can teach you to avoid the pitfalls, right? I can teach you what, I'm not going to tell you how to think, but I can also teach you how to think. Not what to think, but how to think, if that makes sense. So my thing is, I just want to be known for somebody who is all about young people, at the same time who bridges the gap between the young and the old.
So ultimately, it goes back to my first question and your first answer, which is that you've been a connector and a mediator throughout your career and your life experiences, and when it's all said and done, you want people to be able to say, Black people, to be able to say that they know how to think, how to resolve, how to identify internal conflict, and how to resolve external conflicts. You're the great connector, the Resolutionary, Rhandu Adams. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you. And you look beautiful, by the way.
Thank you. Put that on the table. All right. Goes back to my first question and your first answer, which is that you've been a connector and a mediator throughout your career and your life experiences, and when it's all said and done, you want people to be able to say, Black people, to be able to say that they know how to think, how to resolve, how to identify internal conflict, and how to resolve external conflicts. You're the great connector, the Resolutionary, Rhandu Adams. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you. And you look beautiful, by the way.
Thank you. Put that on the table.